thank you, Rebecca, for coming here. I called you Rebecca with your first name because this is our, I think, second encounter.
It is.
Second experience. You are the Senior Vice President, Human Capital at the Conference Board.
That's right.
And you are the expert in analyzing these labor numbers, going into the detail, and what does it really mean to us and to the human capital.
Sure.
So the labor market shows surprising strength, but unlikely to be maintained, you wrote in your report.
Yes. Well, again, first, thank you very much for asking me to come back, Melike. I appreciate that. This statement that the Conference Board issued today is the sum total of the work that I do with the economists at the Conference Board. And certainly I'm not an economist, but I do lead the human capital practice. And so we work together on this to try to understand best how companies will begin to look at the labor situation and whether or not this foretells more hiring in the market, or what we think are some of the things to come in terms of productivity and hiring rates. So it is a surprisingly good number. Now, there are many analysts who will say there are some ways in which you need to look at this data with a little skepticism. You know, it was a week later in coming because of the government shutdown. Some of the furloughed workers were not counted. So it's a little bit something to take a look at, but not necessarily perhaps with quite the same confidence as we may have had in earlier months' numbers. But nevertheless, 204,000 jobs being added to the economy is a very good thing. We don't think that that's necessarily something that's sustainable in the long term. You know, that's our thought collectively on that.
204,000
Yes.
addition to the non-farm payroll. And you're saying that it's, you know, we should rely on it. It's most probably accurate, but it is not going to be sustained. What are your expectations going forward then?
Well, there are many of us who believe that given the other indications of the economy that we have, for example, CEO confidence is down for the third quarter. We just released, you know, a few weeks back that report, and that's an indication of how confident CEOs are both about the economy and also their own industry. And if they're not confident, and if that's been a significant drop from the second quarter, then it doesn't portend good omens for a lot of hiring. And in fact, when you look at today's numbers, 44,000 were in the retail sector. And of that 44,000, we don't know the exact numbers just yet, but I would think many of those are temporary workers. You know, UPS, for example, hired a great many workers to take us through the holiday season. A lot of retail folks are going to be hiring temporary workers. So that may be a number that's, again, a little soft. You know,
so in December, we're going to see the numbers increasing due to the temp jobs? Perhaps, because we do see that. We have seen that in the past, right? And retail, are you saying the retail is strong or not? Is it seasonal?
I'm just saying that when you look at the retail numbers, many of those might be temporary,
seasonal,
right?
Seasonal.
And when you also combine this with some of the consumer sentiments around how much money they expect to be spending during the holiday season, it's down from last year.
Okay.
So, you know, there's a couple of different things in the wind that gives us an indication that this may not be a sustainable big jump.
So if not 204,000, what are we going to see passing, of course, December? Like on an average, do you have estimates?
Well, we don't try to guess too far into the market, but you know, when you look at the last 2 months, which were also just revised upwards, that's also a good sign. So we're hoping that there is perhaps something of a trend here. I think also we had some good news about a 2.8 growth rate. So that's good too, but we're not sure that that's necessarily going to be reflective of the next time we look at this. We think it's closer to 1.5 to 2 at best, given that you have high inventory and you also had a government shutdown for 16 days. So I think that's going to have an impact as well in terms of overall productivity growth. And I think CEOs and those who are hiring managers are going to look at that same data and perhaps decide that it may not be the time to add significantly to the payroll.
I will come to that because that's your expertise. What does this mean to the employers? Yes, we know that the number for the employees increased, but what do the bosses and the employers, the big guys do? But you pointed a very interesting number here, 1.8. Even you said 2 point or 1.8
Well,
8 you said for the
our-
GDP.
Our projection for the
Your
fourth quarter is,
projections for the fourth quarter.
1.5 to 2.
1.5, sorry, you said. I'm sorry, yeah.
That's okay.
The Bloomberg economist said that it would have gone down to 2%, yet we saw an increase, 2.8. But I looked behind the numbers and I saw household purchases slow down, business investment slow down. So the inventories kept the GDP up.
That's right, that's right.
So is this healthy?
Well, you know, of course, my friends who are economists at the conference board would say that it's probably not going to see anything that looks like 2.8% growth.
Right? Okay.
Much closer to
You're definitely
1.5
right.
to 2.
I agree. And let's go back to the employers. What do these numbers mean for the employers? Oh, also, we're talking about the non-farm payrolls, but the unemployment, can we share with our audience, what did that come? Unemployment rate.
It moved slightly from 7.2 to 7.3. So not a radical swing.
No
and I
change.
Think not really.
From
And
the expectations.
I think that was pretty much the consensus.
Okay, so let's go back. What does this mean for the employer, the 204,000 new jobs?
Well, let's set aside for the moment how many of them may be temporary and which sectors.
Yes, let's put that.
Let's put that aside.
Yes.
I do think that there'll be continued challenges in the marketplace in terms of finding all of the skilled workers that they need. And there are some industries where that's particularly acute, and there are some parts of the economy where you are seeing growth. For example, if you're looking at the oil and gas explosion explosion's the wrong word, the oil and gas industry in
Yes,
North
I know.
Dakota, some good signs there. But given that Americans are less mobile than they've ever been in probably the last 50 years, it's combined with an exodus of baby boomers who are retiring, it's a skills shortage, and there are an awful lot of employers who are finding that they're not finding the perfect candidate, but they're struggling to accept the candidate they can find. You know, in the previous times, you would have perhaps 5 skills that you had to have, and now they're hiring people who have maybe 3 of those 5. There are some who would argue that the recovery has taken longer than we've seen in, I think, since the Depression. And so this very long time where people are unemployed, that their skills have begun to erode in larger numbers than perhaps we've seen in other recessions. So, you know, that does not speak toward a quick fix for that issue. And I'm concerned that there may be more erosion ahead if some of these people who have been out of work for a long time simply cannot really re-enter into the marketplace because they can't close that gap.
Are we talking about the underemployment?
In many cases, yes, or unemployment, yes.
Because
also
people-
unemployment, that's right.
Let's look at it breakdown. You said 44,000 in retail. Do we see tourism, manufacturing picking up? How about the other sectors, education?
Yes. Now I don't have some of those figures in front of me, I'm afraid. But in many of the sectors, there was a rise. I know that in the government, federal government, there was a decline, and it just came out a few minutes ago. So we have to spend a little bit more time looking at some of the different sectors. But most of them did have an increase in jobs added.
Okay, and also, you know, we're looking at the increase in the 204,000. But how about the average hours? Average income, you know, because that's a good indicator to
Yes,
income earned.
That's right. But it's only 2 cents more an hour.
Just 2 cents
2 cents.
more an hour.
Yes.
What does it mean?
It's not going to be the lift that you would hope. If one could argue that if you have existing employees and you want to get more productivity from them, and then perhaps that's rewarded by you know, greater salaries, I'm not seeing that, at least from today's numbers. So.
I
2
see.
cents is not enough to lift.
Doesn't satisfy. Thank you so much for all your inputs. I see that the market is a little mixed now in the greens too, but everyone is going to right now talk about tapering because
Yes.
GDP came 2.8, non-farm payroll came 204,000. So
Well,
last question, last 10 seconds.
right.
Do you think now tapering is again in the talks for December?
Oh, I think they'll continue to talk about it, but I think if once they fear that you know, there is an economy that's chugging along, they'll start to think that tapering's around the corner.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank
I
you so
appreciate
much.
it.